My guest today is writer-director Connor Doyle, and his work primarily deals with the human existence, using genre to explore challenging subjects of loss, trauma, and uncertainty. And he's an alumnus of Hampshire College, where he completed The Judgment, a psychological drama based on the short story by Franz Kafka, which can actually be found on YouTube. Now, working mostly in photography for the past few years, his newest short film, In the Flesh, serves as his return to narrative filmmaking. And Connor is here today to discuss that short film thriller, In the Flesh. So let's welcome writer, director Connor Doyle to the show. Welcome, Connor.
Thank you so much for having me, Ward. It's a pleasure to be on here.
Well, you're very, very welcome. Now, you went from filming The Judgment in 2016 to working in photography, then releasing your 40-minute short film In the Flesh this year. What inspired you to get back into filmmaking?
I've always loved filmmaking. My background is from filmmaking, screenwriting. I did a lot of both types of work in college. Hampshire College has like a very like the filmmaking course is kind of very closely intertwined with the course, and both really stress analog formats, and that's something I've always kind of been drawn towards in terms of my personal work. Although I creatively I do a lot of different things just in terms of like what piques my interest. But I'm a filmmaker, or at least that's what's always kind of driven me. I love film. I love making films, um, and I guess after coming out of college, it's always kind of difficult just being like an independent producing work, and just coming out of the pandemic and kind of touching on some like personal milestones in my life. I kind of got to a point where I had to make something, or else it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and it's I talk to a lot of people where they intertwine photography and film.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot, especially if you're scouting locations, if you're trying to get ideas. I mean, photography can spur on inspiration for new films. So my next question to you is, where did you get the idea for In the Flesh? Where did it come from? Because it is a dark psychological thriller.
It is. And I actually started having the idea in the middle of the 2020 pandemic. Just oddly enough, just from like a technical standpoint, I was like researching and finishing up a script for another idea, but because of that would have been like involved several locations, like several characters. Um, but then the pandemic happened, and that idea just went out the door, essentially. I mean, I've heard for a lot of people, they've had similar situations where they've had to like rethink a lot of their goals. But I've always been attracted to psychological horror and thriller as a genre, just in the way that it explores these dark themes, but there's always like a psychological element to it. Way you can use genre in order to like delve into more deeper um, like emotional themes, like really concentrate on individual character. And during the time like between 2015 2019, there's been like a really great resurgence of like more conscientious horror, like from the films of Jordan Peele, Ari Aster, David Robert Mitchell, where they're really concentrating on these like really key social themes. But it's not like, although there can be paranormal elements, like blood and gut elements, that sort of thing. It's more like based on the character and the character development, which I've always appreciated. I've always tried to do in my like previous work. Um, but I just going off of that, was trying to figure out an idea of where I could essentially shoot a film in my house. I mean, which essentially what I did within the Flesh. The entire film, well, at least most, like 90%, 95% of the film takes place in a single location, which is actually the house that I live in. Um, but just going off of that, I really did want to delve into kind of this story about one person being kidnapped by another. And that kind of took shape in a lot of different forms. Like originally, it was going to be something a little bit more socially conscious. So originally, it was going to be this idea about a guy being forced to conform to a certain community, kind of closer to like Get Out or something like that. But then it kind of delved into um, more on the family element and ideas of grief. And then this idea kind of explored in more towards like one person dealing with trauma of a lost one.
Well, it's a very twisted psychological thriller. I mean, and it's really twisted. So let's start off with the main
Mhm.
character, Jeremy, played by Chad Malen. Tell
Yeah.
us about Jeremy.
Oh, sorry.
Tell us about the character Jeremy, played by Chad Malen.
Well, Jeremy is he's got a lot of problems. So when thinking about Jeremy, well, he kind of came out from this him trying to bring his brother essentially back to life. And without giving a bit too much away from him, he does that in probably not the most reasonable fashion. So, like, for people who haven't seen the film, he is kidnapping men and forcing them to play act his dead brother. And that kind of really came out from this idea about how we deal with grief, and it's very like centered, and we forget about the people around us. So, dealing with ideas of transference, but also lack of empathy. And that's really the key to understanding Jeremy's character. And, like, for me, understanding Jeremy's character when writing him and having Chad perform him, which he does a very excellent. He has a very excellent performance and really brings that character to life.
He
Um,
does, and it's funny
yes.
that you bring up empathy, but Jeremy's idea of empathy is completely different than the actual definition.
Right.
And he he comes across as religious, but he doesn't really understand the deeper meaning of that. Which you play this element that's a part of him in this film. And
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't come across as merciful whatsoever. But like you said, he kidnaps this guy named Ted, and
Yes.
he's forcing him to play the part of his dead brother. And what I loved about this film is that you take us on a journey, but you don't give away the story. So as you're watching it, it slowly unfolds. And what I loved about it is that when anyone is watching this film, they're not going to figure it out too
Mm-hmm.
quickly. And for a 40-minute film, that's really hard to do. So you just give enough, and we don't really figure it out through Jeremy. We figure it out by watching Ted.
Exactly. And
You
I
know,
think
so I love that element, and plus the whole story with Jeremy especially reminds me that no matter what we do, we can't change the past.
and that's essentially what Jeremy's trying to do. But that's really the tragedy of the character. Um, he's trying to change the past, but he's kind of more grounded in his personal guilt. And that's also kind of the irony of his religious background, too. It's just, it's all centered on guilt.
It is
But,
because he's trying to seek peace through the
right,
justification of his actions, and he will never achieve it because the end result is always the same.
exactly. But then also going on a kind of a personal level, and viewers at home, this is kind of a spoiler, but he never really understands what his brother wants at the end, and it's kind of more informed of like what he personally wants.
Yeah, and I'm not going to give that away because
Right, neither am I.
that's the center of this story. Because at first I thought Jeremy was trying to reverse his actions to his brother David, but he was really trying to convince himself that he did the right thing for his brother when he really completely misinterpreted what his brother David was trying to tell him.
Ooh, okay.
Okay,
Um,
because when as the story was moving along, we know that David gets sick,
yes.
and one thing about people who get ill, or maybe they get terminally ill, their battle isn't just physical, it's mental. They can quietly say things to themselves or may say things to others, but deep down, they want the pain to go away, but they really want to live. And for a lot of them, they don't know how to communicate that correctly to those close around them so they'll understand. And then I looked at Jeremy and I'm thinking, Jerry, Jeremy was hearing David, he wasn't listening.
Exactly. But with going off of that, I'm kind of curious. Um, so when watching it, and this kind of question has come up with other like people who have seen the film. Do you think and spoilers, everyone. Um, do you think Jeremy actually killed David, the real David?
I looked at it that he did.
Ah, okay.
I looked at it that he did because to me, he thought he was obeying David's wishes, but I think that he misinterpreted what David was trying to say. People will say things,
Mhm.
but you have to look behind the words and go, okay, that's not exactly what they mean. They're actually just crying out for help. And David was just crying out for help. I don't think he was asking for his life to be over. Um, he was just trying to find an answer. Hopefully, I guess, to get cured or whatever. But in
Mhm.
the end, I kept looking at it like Jeremy proves the point that two wrongs don't make a right,
That's correct. That's
because he
right.
kidnapped Ted. To me, he took out his brother, but in the end, I looked at it as a mercy killing.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
kind of like it's like
It,
putting your pet
hmm.
down.
Well, yes. I mean, that actually kind of went into the direction of the character. Uh, there is an answer to actually if he did kill David or not. I don't know if I should like.
No, I wouldn't spoil it. I would let
No.
people watch it and then figure it out for themselves.
Okay.
But I love the way that Ted started to change the story because I thought it was what I thought was so interesting, and I thought was this was a very cool element, is
Mm-hmm.
that Jeremy creates this film script based off the home VHS tapes. And then
Mm-hmm.
he has his lines that he knows he's always said. He knew the lines that David always said, so he makes Ted say the lines. And it was kind of funny because for the first 2 weeks that he had kidnapped him, he's like, "You're not even trying." In other words, you know, it's like telling an actor to dig deep and find the real character. And I
Mm-hmm.
found it kind of humorous from an acting point of view. And but then Ted knew that that was going to be his course for survival until he turned and saw the calendar,
Right. I
which
mean,
I
it's
just thought
interesting.
was
There.
this very slight little thought because now when the audience sees the calendar with Ted, they don't really know what that means. So you still kept the mystery alive.
It's interesting. They're almost like filmmakers of a way, just in how they. Well, I always imagined Jeremy as a terrible director, and he kind of is. Like he really doesn't know how to like. And this is, of course, despite all the terrible things that Jeremy is doing, he doesn't really understand until later how to like fully communicate who his brother was. Um,
Well,
and
Ted proved that. See,
yes,
towards the end, when Ted started changing the script, and normally Jeremy would just get mad and go, "You follow the script, say it word for word." Because now, from what I could tell, he had to be at least kidnapped for at least for 2 months. So then,
mm-hmm.
as time went on, Ted thought, "Okay, I'm going to talk to Jeremy as if I am his brother, but I'm going to start saying things that are not in the script." And so he started pushing Jeremy because he was trying to figure out, Ted was trying to figure out, what is this really all about? Because he didn't really know until he saw that one video.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it's funny. Jeremy is psychological on one side and Ted is psychological on the other. So there is this battle of psychological wits going on
Exactly.
towards the end of the film, which I thought was awesome because I was deep inside I was cheering for Ted. I'm like, push him, push his buttons, see how far you can go.
Mm-hmm. Although it's also interesting because you still do feel some sympathy for Jeremy. Just not for what he does, but what he's gone through. Um, but he doesn't. That's the thing, though. Despite everything, he doesn't fully like understand the need of others until it's kind of too late.
Yeah, he doesn't. I mean, he has this complete social disconnect
Correct. Yeah.
because in a way because David would be his younger brother, but in a way he looked up to David. And I've seen this. I've heard stories to where an older sibling actually looks up to the younger one,
Hmm.
and maybe because they think the younger one became more successful. In this case, you could tell that the personalities were completely different. David was very outgoing. Jeremy was not,
Right.
and And I think in a way behind the scenes of the story, maybe he felt um, that he was the only one that was trying to help David when David got ill. And so to me, this is the great thing about this film in the flesh, because when the audience watches it, they have a lot of different thoughts going on at the same time. Because the
Mhm.
way that you staged the pace of the story, which I thought was just brilliant, because nobody figures this out until almost to the very end. So if anybody likes to watch films and they like to play detective, this is going to be one that they're really not going to be able to figure out until those couple of elements that show up towards the end, and then you're like, oh, now I see what's really going on.
Mhm.
So I thought you placed it all very, very well in this film, which is just so it's just so fun to watch because it's
Thank
a
you.
battle of wits.
Thank you. Well, it's also a kind of a battle of survival too. Just
Oh,
like
definitely.
Ted is,
That's a given.
yeah. I mean, Ted is trying to do everything to appease this terrible guy, and in doing so, he kind of strips his own personality. Um, which I mean, if knowing him from but the very few seconds that we knew him beforehand isn't sort of a bad thing. He wasn't a great guy, um, but he didn't really have much to live for until now. But yeah, I mean, going into the writing of the film, I did want to like slowly reveal the detail of like this whole entire world and what actually is going on.
Well, you took Ted's character from the very beginning to where, yeah, he may have not been really a nice guy, but after the experience, I think that if there was, let's just say, if there was a sequel, then he is going to end up showing people around him probably more empathy and be a little bit more kinder than he was before. And maybe it's because of PTSD going to set in, but I think that he would be a changed man after that ordeal. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but again, incredible. So, what were some of the other questions that audience members would ask you about the film?
Well, besides whether, well, what I just asked, I'm not too sure, just in terms of whether that final uh, talk through the scripted conversation actually happened. How did how did Jeremy find Ted? How many more people did Jeremy have to get through in order to find Ted? And why was Ted especially such a more special character? Was he was able to survive the ordeal?
Well, the thing that I was thinking of was that Jeremy would be scouting the area for men that resembled David.
Yes, which is what he
And
did.
which is what he did, because when you look at Ted and then you see the VHS tapes of David, you're like, okay, he needed the visual for his little play acting scheme, because
Mm-hmm.
in his mind it's, the hurt is still fresh, it's not going away. He is trying to figure out a way to rectify his guilt, maybe his shame in whatever he he did uh, to David or with David. And so, it that's what I love about these types of films, is that it can create more questions, but that's a great thing because the audience continues to think about it, they continue to talk about it. They're trying to, in their mind, write the other script of the
Mm-hmm.
story, and that's what makes film so compelling.
Yeah, I think audience engagement like that is like something you can only hope for. Just because they are following the characters, they believe in the characters, and like it made an impact, which is, yeah, as a filmmaker, is something that makes a lot of difference.
So, how did you cast your film?
Casting, well, that took a bit of time trying to find the people that were going to bring the film to life. I knew Tanner Goldberg, who plays Ted in the Flesh, actually from a mutual friend. Surprising thing, Tanner isn't really a dramatic actor. He's more of a comedic actor, or that's his basis. And I had seen his improv and his sketch comedy, like in the past, and but that's also the great thing about dramatic acting and comedic. They can play hand to hand so very often. Um, but he also kind of he had the ability to like bring the intensity of the role, which was needed for Ted. Um, and also Declan Shannon, who plays the real David, I found him through Backstage.com, and he is also a comedian. Although David is a very funny character, so that was kind of a given. Um, at finding Jeremy, that was a little bit more of a challenge, but it needed to be because like we really wanted to get this character right. But we were able to find Chad Malen through Backstage.com, and it was very eerie just because. So one thing that I did for In the Flesh, and I usually do for most of my work, I make a hand drawn storyboard, and that just helps me figure out blocking, editing during the film, breaking down all of our scenes so it like makes the process easier during production. And I kid you not, Chad looks exactly like the drawings that I made for Jeremy, um, up to a T. And I had never met Chad before. I'd never seen his face. My image of Jeremy was kind of coming from like a '90s grunge, like aging '90s grunge um, type of character. So thinking of like David Grohl as a psychopath, essentially. Um, but yeah, when like going through the auditioning process with him and having him understand the character, it kind of it, we realized that he was Jeremy.
Well, then how did you handle creating the VHS tapes? Did you actually film it on a VHS camera, or did you just film it, take it into post, and create the look of a VHS?
No, we actually shot it on VHS tape. Yeah, I knew that.
That's
Well, like I said
authentic.
before, yeah. I mean, I am very much an analog nerd when it comes to media. For my photography, I still shoot on like black and white and color film negative. I shoot Super 8. A lot of my basis in college was based on that, so I've always had like an appreciation for the old stuff. And the thing about videotape is there's kind of like a frailty to it, which has a lot to inform on memory. And that's the thing when Jeremy kind of looks back at, yeah, his memories of David. Um, it's there, it's tangible, and when you look at VHS tape, it feels more tangible, but it's also it's impermanent. It's not fully there. There's like a distancing effect with it, and I knew I did want to like.
And you did it. You
I
did it perfectly.
Well, thank you.
I mean, because think about it. He's putting the VHS tape into the player,
Hmm.
so you're holding the memory, It's not like trying to airplay it from your phone
Right.
because you're always carrying it around. But there's something about the VHS tape. And then when you see how VHS tape footage looks like, there is this element of the past, which you can't get from taking a video on your iPhone or whatever. There's a complete difference when it comes to VHS. And
Exactly.
and I just thought that whole element was brilliant because even if the VHS tape was done, let's say depending on the time period of this film, even if it was a year or 2 years before he kidnapped Ted, there was still enough separation there. Plus, Jeremy's still carrying around the pain.
Hmm.
It could have been 5 years, but it was probably only a year or two at least. But it was just that element that creates for the audience to go, okay, we're looking into the past. We're looking into Jeremy's memory. And that was the perfection on the VHS uh, element of this film.
Thank you. But yeah, going off of that, so the actual like events during the VHS tapes were actually like 15 or 10 years beforehand. But that gives you an idea of how long he's been carrying like these emotions. And like he can't let go of it himself.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Now I have to ask because this was classified as a short film. The film's
Yes.
43 minutes long. A short film, according to the Academy, is any film less than 40 minutes, and a feature film is anything over 40 minutes. Why did you hit the middle instead of going for a sub 20-minute short film?
Uh, because of, well, mostly because of necessity. So the full script was 30 pages. And we shot the full 30 pages. Going into the edits, kind of made a decision just taking it taking another 20 minutes out would have taken too much. It's just the film kind of worked in the pace that it existed to its own detriment in a way. Just finding like venues to view the film, like uh, festivals don't appreciate that length. So I've kind of discovered. Although we did manage to get into one film festival that we won a few awards from. Yeah, Thing in the Basement, it won Best Extended Short, and Chad actually won Best Performance.
Well, he would
Um,
deserve that, that's for sure.
oh, yes,
Oh,
very
yeah.
much so. Um, but I think if, yeah, if I did have to, like, go back and decide to make it a feature length, that could be a possibility, but in hindsight, the film does work very much well as itself, and I've been told that it's like the perfect length just because it's centered on it's centered on these two characters. It is, although it delves into a lot of emotional themes, it's not a huge story, and it was never intended to be a huge story. Um, but there is no lag, as I've been told in the script. It's very clear cuts, which is if it can keep an audience's engagement, then I'm more than happy.
Well, it kept mine because that's one of the first things I watch is to see if a film, regardless if it's a short film or a feature film, is it lagging anywhere? Is there something? Because sometimes if it starts to lag, you're like they could have just cut that out and
Right.
then move the film along. But the pace of this film is so good because you don't tell us You don't tell us, you don't show us what's coming. So like I said before, the audience is really becoming Ted. So we're Ted, and we're like, okay, if that was me, what would I do? How would I get out of this? Um, and then we're all watching Jeremy. We're like, okay, so he's leaving the room. How long is it going to take him to come back? Is there something that we could do to escape? And so we all asked ourselves those questions when we see thrillers like this. So the audience is completely engaged. This film is not slow in any way, but it's paced in a way in which you never give it give the give the plot away. We don't see the twist coming. We don't see the climax coming. You take us right there. You deliver us into that moment so we never figure it out before it happens. That's very hard to do.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that I'm glad it doesn't lag or make anyone distracted, and at least it keeps people engaged. That's really one of the main goals for this.
So what's the future for the film at the moment?
Well, right now we're actually so we have the film on Amazon Prime, and we may do a few extra screenings of it, maybe within the Chicagoland area. Um, but now it's in a place where people like around the globe can see it and enjoy it. We're also selling physical copies on our website, including, I kid you not, VHS copies.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I know people who will search out for VHS players so they can still play their old VHS tape. So I think that is a cool marketing idea with this film. And so what do you have a new project coming up?
Trying to figure out a few different ideas. I think the next step forward would be something that is feature length. Um, Probably not without giving too much away. Kind of delving into a paranormal drama, although we'll see if that actually happens. Um, but that will probably be take up the next few years, just because that's going to involve a little bit more funding. Um,
Oh yeah.
In the Flesh, like, was very independent. It only had 25 to 3,000, excuse me, $30,000 budget, and which I mean we were able to use like that by completely to like sculpt the entire film idea to be the best that it could be. And I hope that shows in the film too. Um, but yeah, I think next step would be something a little bit bigger. Maybe the idea I had before the pandemic happens. That would actually make things kind of go full circle.
Well, I can't wait to see what you do next. And I think a paranormal drama definitely works. I know that that's a perfect genre that people dive into when it comes to film. Audiences love things like that. And ladies and gentlemen, Connor Doyle's newest short, In the Flesh. Well, Ted, he's an unlikable office manager, and then one day kidnapped by Jeremy and forced to play act his dead brother David. Slowly gaining Jeremy's confidence, Ted discovers his captor's true intentions and makes a plan to escape. This is a psychological thriller that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Nothing is given away in this film. You are taken along on a man's disturbing actions to prove what he did was right, even when his actions were wrong. Chad Malen plays the deranged Jeremy, who again wants to justify his actions to his brother David, but Ted, played by actor Tanner Goldberg, slowly starts to see the light come into view as to what Jeremy's true intentions are for him. Connor Doyle's writings, well, places all of us into the shoes of the character Ted, and we're watching the story unfold, and we place ourselves into Ted's shoes, and we keep asking ourselves, what would I do in that situation? That's brilliant writing when the audience feels like they are living the part, well, in this case, the kidnapped victim. I encourage everyone to see this film. It's on Prime Video right now, so check out In the Flesh. And the next time you walk through a parking lot at night, you may want to make sure you have a taser or pepper spray in your hand, or you could end up playing the part of somebody's dead brother. So Connor, I want to thank you so much for sharing this, well, creepy psychological thriller with me today.
Thank you very much for having me on board.
You're very welcome. And again, ladies and gentlemen, In the Flesh, the thriller that's available right now on Prime Video. Check it out. Add it to your list. You're going to enjoy it just like I did. So I want to thank all of you for watching and listening, ladies and gentlemen. Please visit us at bondoncinema.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our Bond on Cinema Prime show. And as for me, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.